Picture this. You're at a party. You've just had a genuinely good 15-minute conversation with a guy. Let's call him Mark. You talked about travel, about your mutual friend, about that weird shared experience of loving a movie nobody else seems to remember. It felt real. It felt warm. And then, maybe 3 days later, you run into him at the grocery store, and he looks at you with that particular expression, that slow blink, that almost smile, and says, "Hey, you." Not your name, just you. Like you're a pronoun now, like your name has simply evaporated from his brain. And here's what most people assume in that moment. They think it means he wasn't listening, that he didn't care, that the conversation didn't matter, that you didn't matter. And I want to spend the next few minutes completely dismantling that assumption, because the psychology behind why certain men forget names so easily is genuinely fascinating, and it says something very different about them than you might think. Let's start with the brain, because the brain is where all great drama begins. When you meet someone and learn their name, your brain doesn't treat that name like a piece of information, the way it treats, say, the fact that water boils at 100 degrees. Names are what psychologists call arbitrary labels. There's nothing about the word Sarah that tells your brain anything meaningful about Sarah. It's a sound attached to a person by pure social convention. And your brain, especially under the mild stress of a social situation, is actually working very hard to process all the other things about that person simultaneously. Their tone of voice, their body language, whether they seem friendly or threatening, the emotional register of the room. Names, in that whole orchestra of sensory input, are a single quiet violin. Now here's where it gets interesting. Research in cognitive psychology has shown that men and women tend to differ in what they prioritize encoding during social interactions. This isn't a moral judgment, it's a neurological tendency. Women, on average, show stronger activation in areas of the brain associated with social memory, emotional detail, and relational.
And here's a metaphor that I think captures this beautifully. Imagine your memory as a camera. Some people take their photos in portrait mode. They zoom in, they capture your face clearly, your name is in the frame, the details are sharp. Others shoot in landscape mode. They capture the whole scene, the mood, the light, the energy of the room. They have this sweeping emotional panorama of the moment. But when you zoom in to find your name, it's a small figure in the background, a little blurry. It was never the focal point of the shot. Men who forget names easily are often, counterintuitively, the ones who were most present in the emotional experience of meeting you. But let's go deeper, because this isn't just about attention. It's also about anxiety. There's a specific type of social anxiety that researchers sometimes call name anxiety, and it disproportionately affects people who are simultaneously trying very hard to make a good impression. You know what happens when you're in a conversation and part of your brain is monitoring how you're coming across? That self-monitoring uses working memory. And working memory is a finite resource. It's like RAM on a computer. The more processes you have running, the less space there is for new data. So a man who's genuinely nervous, genuinely invested in connecting well, genuinely trying to be funny or interesting or warm, that man has almost no spare cognitive bandwidth left to anchor your name into long-term storage. The very effort of caring makes the name harder to keep. There's something almost poetic about that, isn't there? He forgot your name because he was too busy trying to impress you to remember it. Now, some men have a more structural explanation for this pattern. Working memory differences, attention-related traits, even the way certain personalities process the world. Some people simply live more in the abstract than the particular. They remember conversations in feelings and impressions rather than facts and labels. They can tell you exactly how a conversation made them feel, but couldn't tell you the person's job title, hometown, or name.
And then there's one more layer that I think deserves to be said out loud. Cultural conditioning. Boys are not typically socialized to practice the social rituals around names the way girls often are. Think about how social spaces are structured in childhood.
Girls' friendships tend to be built on intimate, reciprocal exchanges. You tell me yours, I'll tell you mine. We remember each other's details because that's how closeness is built. Many boys' social experiences are built around shared activity: the game, the team, the task. You can spend an entire summer with someone and relate to them entirely through what you do together, not who you are in the biographical sense. Names in that context are almost incidental. You might know someone for years as the fast kid or the one with the good shot before you actually know their first name. That's not coldness. That's a completely different model of connection. So, what does all of this mean for you, practically speaking? If you're a man who forgets names and you've spent years feeling vaguely guilty about it, feeling like it's evidence that you're a bad person or an inattentive friend, I want to offer you a reframe. It's not a character flaw. It's a cognitive pattern that can be gently worked with. Simple techniques like repeating a name immediately when you hear it, associating it with a vivid mental image, or even just admitting honestly and warmly in the moment, "I'm terrible with names, tell me yours again," can close that gap meaningfully. The awareness itself is already doing something important. And if you've been on the receiving end of this, if you felt that sting of being called "hey you," maybe this gives you a slightly different frame to hold it in. The forgetting might be the most human, imperfect, kind of endearing evidence that someone was genuinely trying in that moment, and their brain just couldn't do everything at once. Memory is not a perfect recording device. It's a selective, emotional, deeply personal system. And the gaps in it, sometimes they tell a more interesting story than the things it keeps. So next time someone forgets your name, pause before you decide what it means. The brain is complicated, attention is finite, and most people are doing their best with the cognitive equipment they were handed. If this gave you something to think about your own memory, about the people in your life, about the strange and beautiful way the brain works, drop a comment below. Tell me, are you someone who forgets names or someone who always remembers them? Because I